OWS, REI, $150 sleeping bag. He's got that given to me. It's really a nice gift. And the good thing about REI, it has a guarantee for life, so I can use it out here, take it back to an REI and get the money if I run out of money.
Where to go? Where to go?
So, John, why are we here?
We're here in Tamiment Library at NYU, and we're here because I have a photo archive that I donated to Tamiment Library. It's about 30 years of work that I did professionally as a photojournalist on the Lower East Side of New York and different parts of the world. They have my archive here forever, and I'm in the process of doing archive work, which is identifying the pictures which are on negatives and helping them to organize it to where people can go into it, 30 years from now, and they have a special subject of interest that might have happened in the Lower East Side, or what they call the East Village now. They can find it and use photos, and so that's why I'm here. I'm also doing a protest by camping out in front of this library right now about NYU's contribution towards the rapid gentrification of the Lower East Side and the expansion of NYU space into the West Village.
Yeah, I'm camping out here in front of the library, and tomorrow we're having action. Students are going to come out and camp out with me, and we're going to have drums and food, and all kinds of stuff. So come by, starting at 7 o'clock tomorrow.
Cool.
Or get a sleeping bag and come back out and camp out.
I will, man. Good luck.
While my archive is sitting in the library warm and comfortable at night, I'm sleeping in a sleeping bag right in front of the library outside here.
So it's like double duty for you.
Yeah, but it puts NYU in a strange position in the fact that here I am out there really saying a lot of negative stuff about the university, but they have my archive in the library here.
Do you find it ironic in any way that your work, your photography, your archive is inside the library, warm, dry, safe, and you're outside here on the street without a home, wet, cold?
Yeah, I mean, you actually think the university would think it was worth their while to put me up someplace and let me do this archiving without making me pay to come here, sleep on the street, go into the library during the day and do the work on it, because honestly, the rights go over to the library after I'm dead, and 30, 40 years from now, that archive is going to be priceless. I have practically every countercultural celebrity that ever hit the streets of the Lower East Side in there. The era that I photographed is gone and never going to come back, and it's a very famous period of time in the history of the Lower East Side, or East Village, which is what the real estate developers started calling it when they wanted to gentrify the neighborhood. So, yeah, I mean, I kind of have a hard time understanding why they wouldn't see it in their interest to put me up in a hotel room and give me minimum wage to go in there and archive it. I've constantly felt like they don't really understand what the value of that whole thing is, although Tamiment has a limited amount of stuff on the internet. The only reason my stuff is up is because I signed a contract that forced them to put it out there. And the small part that they did put out has about 6,000 hits on it now, which is like so much more than anything else they've got in this whole library up online. At least Tamiment Library has. So, yeah, I mean, it's confusing to me. Although the legacy is going to be my stuff is already being used by a lot of documentary people that are doing documentaries on the Lower East Side. Photos are in the Museum of Reclaimed Space. My photos are in the Yippie Museum.
So how long have you been down on the Lower East Side, and how did you get there?
Well, I'd been up here to visit the Yippies over at Bleecker Street. This is the first place I came, and I lived here in this very building for a few months, and part of the time I lived across the street at Studio 10. I met Abby Hoffman, I met Bob Fast from WBAI, I met Wavy Gravy, who was the MC at Woodstock, Daruba Ben Wahad eventually, most of the, now the people that started the Rainbow Family, Garrick Beck, Joni Freedom. I met people from the Living Theater here, Judith Molina. I mean, the list goes on and on. It was a place where I really was able to come to and not only have a place to live, but we made enough money to feed ourselves over at Studio 10 across the street, and we were doing all kinds of political activities in New York, and I learned so much from that, and the Yippies always have been, which I'm really good at myself now, is manipulating the media to cover what you're doing, and that's where I learned it. I learned it all here. I got involved in organizing against nuclear weapons at the Savannah River bomb plant near Aiken, South Carolina. It's where they make all the plutonium for U.S. nuclear weapons, and I was part of a protest there where we tried to get into the administration building office of the plant, and were arrested and charged with trespassing under the Atomic Energy Act of 1954. We went on trial in federal court, and I represented myself. And part of the reason we were protesting, we were against nuclear weapons, but also the plant was covering up the high level of radioactive releases that they were doing into the environment around. The plant is a 300 square mile area, and they have signs posted around the plant for hunters that if you shoot anything coming off of this land, don't eat it because it's all radioactive. And they had been covering up the shoddy waste disposal practices. Routinely, the plant released into the atmosphere large amounts of radioactive tritium. In fact, the former waste disposal officer for the plant came to our trial and tried to testify that he quit because he was disgusted with the shoddy handling of nuclear materials that was going on at that plant, and the judge refused to let him testify in front of the jury. In fact, the judge didn't let any of our witnesses, including the very radical Catholic anti-war activist Philip Barragan, testify, and I actually cross-examined him in federal court, which got the judge real angry at me because he laid out a legal framework for indicting anybody, including the judge involved in production of weapons of mass destruction under the Nuremberg war crimes principles, and compared them all to the Nazis, and that they all ought to be locked up for a conspiracy to produce weapons of mass destruction. And the judge didn't particularly like being compared to the Nazis, so he really got it in for me, and I ended up going to federal prison. I became a federal fugitive for 3.5 years. Got all the way to Nicaragua. Was there doing That's when I started doing documentary photography. I was documenting what was going on with the Sandanistas and the Contras in Nicaragua, and getting my photos published in a radical paper here called The Guardian, which was a national paper, a national radical paper.
Were they attached to the Guardian in the UK, or?
No, it was a radical independent paper called The Guardian, but it had a national circulation. It's probably the biggest radical paper ever had that wasn't connected with some left-wing party or anything. Right, it was just a regular paper, but it was leftist. At any rate, because I couldn't get a new passport because I went there as a federal fugitive. Eventually, I got picked up by Nicaraguan immigration and arrested and put in jail there for 30 days in Nicaragua. And at that point, they gave me an option to renounce my U.S. citizenship and help join the Sandanista army or go back to the United States and be arrested. So I went back to Miami, was arrested. I did pretty close to a year in federal prison. As soon as I got out, when you get out of federal prison, they offer you a bus ticket where you want to go on $100. I go New York, and I came to New York, and that's where I ended up spending I guess the next 20 some years. 30.
So what is 1979, 1980?
I was in federal prison in 84, so I got out in 85, and then came here to New York and lived here pretty much up until the last year for the whole period of time. The way I came to New York, and also the way I learned a lot of my organizing and media, propaganda skills was through the Yippies, through the Youth International Party. I organized a pot legalization protest at the University of Florida in Gainesville, which was the first one ever in the state of Florida. And a bunch of Yippies came to it from Atlanta and brought down a paper that they were circulating, their own paper called the Yipster Times. And in the Yipster Times, it had all the contact information for the rest of the country. And they suggested that I come up here to New York and hang out with the center of the paper and the Yippies here at 9 Bleecker Street. So I did. I made a number of trips up here. I plugged in with like so much of what became my future life in New York through this place. A lot of my old friends that are my oldest friends in New York now are people that I originally met here when I first came here. And besides this place, which is a building, but it's now like an official museum of in the city certified, we had a rock and roll club called Studio 10 across the street. We had all kinds of crazy stuff going on over there. And right next door, the Pope of Pot had his pot delivery service, Church of Realized Fantasy. So it was kind of on this one block, there was all kinds of crazy stuff going on. So eventually when I went to federal prison in 1984 and I got out, I said, I've had to leave the South. I can't organize in the South anymore. I don't want to live there. I'm going to New York. This is the first place I came, and I lived here in this very building for a few months, and part of the time I lived across the street at Studio 10. I met Abby Hoffman, I met Bob Fast from WBAI, I met Wavy Gravy, who was the MC at Woodstock, Daruba Ben Wahad eventually, most of the, now the people that started the Rainbow Family, Garrick Beck, Joni Freedom, I met people from the Living Theater here, Judith Molina, I mean, the list goes on and on. It was a place where I really was able to come to and not only have a place to live, but we made enough money to feed ourselves over at Studio 10 across the street, and we were doing all kinds of political activities in New York, and I learned so much from that, and the Yippies always have been, which I'm really good at myself now, is manipulating the media to cover what you're doing, and that's where I learned it all here.
People are going to look back on it and say, like, wasn't that pretty cruel of them to make him sleep out on the sidewalk in order to continue archiving his collection, which he donated to the library? I mean, I think it's pretty fucking cruel. But if they weren't doing that, I wouldn't have this protest going on out here. And I wouldn't have the students organizing, and I wouldn't be getting the media coverage that I'm getting, which is... if you read the recent story that came out today in the Villager newspaper, I'm getting out a lot of propaganda about homelessness, current statistics on homelessness. NYU, it makes them look really bad. So it's kind of a trade-off for me. I'm used to this. For the last year, I occupied at Zuccotti Park, got evicted from there. I went to Freedom Plaza occupation in DC, got evicted from there. I went to Occupy Asheville, got arrested from there. The first person arrested in the state of North Carolina under the new Occupy tent laws, and actually the first person convicted for that. Went to Tampa and camped out at the Republican convention, went to Charlotte, got arrested at the Democratic convention, went back to DC and camped out in front of the Department of Veterans Affairs for a month.
And that was during what, Sandy?
Yeah, I actually
I remember you were out there, and I was a little worried about you.
Well, the funniest part about it
you weren't alone though. You were two other guys.
No, I wasn't, but it was pretty hard out there. They let us actually get up underneath the awning for the Department of Veterans Affairs and stay up, but I mean we were soaking wet. It was pretty hard. The funniest thing is that because we established a relationship with the area commander for Department of Homeland Security, who they had like watching over us there, and in fact he refused to remove us off the sidewalk when the Department of Veterans Affairs wanted to power wash every morning the sidewalk. He told them he wasn't going to send his cops over there because it was the only time I've been part of an occupation where the cops actually agreed with what we were talking about.
Is it because they were veterans?
Because they were veterans. We were talking about the high rates of suicides, the crappy medical treatment people were getting from the VA, the trouble people had getting disability claims that were coming back. And he had one of his own friends in Homeland Security committed suicide by a cop who had an unloaded gun and then caused a disturbance, and the other cops came and shot him. So he actually had my phone number because, look, I don't care. I'm not afraid of them tracking me because I figure I did my time. I'm not scared. If they want to put me back in federal prison, they're going to do it one way or the other. So, you know, I gave my phone number and I had his card, and in case something was coming down over there that I might get him to intervene and stop it, I could call him on. He actually called me right in the middle of the hurricane and wanted to know if I was doing all right, if there was anything they could send over to help us. And I go, you know, send us over some soup and hot coffee. So they actually did that, you know. I mean, like I say, I'm not down with the Department of Homeland Security, but my philosophy has always been, if you can convince the cops not to fuck with you, and
That's
you're
progress.
doing an occupation, then you're better off doing that if you can maintain some kind of a amicable relationship with them and not like get up in their face and make them want to like hurt you. You're better off to do that.
Right,
You know?
progress.
With the bottom line is if they want to be the hard asses, I'll be a hard ass too. I'll make them arrest me. I won't get up and move. But if I don't have to go that far, I'd rather not do that. In fact, like that's what happened here when they called the sergeant over from the 6th Precinct. You know, we had a big dialogue about homelessness, about why I was out here, about like whether or not I was legal. And he actually, like in the end, left and said, you know, okay, John, take care of yourself, and hasn't been back. So, you know, that's been my philosophy.
So do you think that in a way you have a sort of a talent of getting people to think for themselves? Because a lot of times people put on a uniform or whoever they're working for, and it's like whatever idiocy that they pull down the pike, that they throw at them, that they're supposed to enforce, they do it without thinking.
Look, I was a photojournalist photographing cops doing all kinds of shit on the Lower East Side for 20 years. I've dealt with cops like in all kinds of situations where they beat me up, where they arrested me, where they didn't. At this point in time, I'm pretty good with dealing cops. Like, of course, the first thing I pull out of my bag is like, you know, I'm a honorary discharged veteran of the U.S. military, which automatically puts them off a little bit as far as being a hard ass on me.
Right.
I've got my, you know, way of dealing with them down, and I'm pretty used to doing with it. But if you can get them to engage in either debate or conversation, it's good. You know, it's better than just, oh, fuck you, we're gonna arrest you if you don't move. If I can convince them to see the humanity in me and what I'm doing and not want to be a hard ass on me, I think that's a good thing, and I'm pretty good at it. I mean, after all the Asheville cops like were out there to arrest me at Occupy, and now I'd only been back in Asheville for about a week when that happened. They already knew I was back. They sent an undercover cop over there to say, oh, you're John Penley. I go, how the hell do you know that? They go, we already seen video of you. So
Your reputation precedes you?
but I'm a gentleman. If you don't get rough with me, I don't get rough with you. And after that was over with, I don't know how many times I'd be in downtown Asheville, and the cops would come up on me and want to debate me about stuff. I mean, I debated cops about gay marriage, but they started calling me brother after a while, and I'd rather have that kind of relationship, you know, where they're not looking to get me than where they are. I mean, in New York is very hard. In Zuccotti, it didn't matter what you did, they were going to get you, you know. And I remember thinking, like, when we were first down there and there were all these people telling, oh, the police, we love you, you're part of the 99%. I'm going to myself, let's see how long that lasts, you know, because I knew the NYPD, they don't fucking, it's very hard to get them to be humanitarian. Like smaller places, it's easier. They just don't want to do it. They just want to bust heads and arrest people. And it took about like 3 weeks or a month before people stopped all that, you're part of the 99%. And near the end of Zuccotti Park, the cops would show up and it would be, fuck you, pigs, you know. Like nobody was even remotely thinking about trying because they'd already been beat up, arrested, put through central booking, you know, given the tour. which is like in itself one of the most incredible experiences of New York that you can get, and a political awakening. Like, I mean, the first day when I came up to Yippie House, I was arrested with a bunch of yippies who were in the rock and roll club, and they sent in the fire department to tell us they were going to close the club down and get us out of it. And some of us refused to leave. So my very first day in New York, for the first time, I ended up going to central booking. And back then, they could keep you like for a lot longer than they do now. So I went through central booking with a whole bunch of yippies and spent 4 days in jail, and ended up with Bill Kunstler as my lawyer when I got out. But that completely solidified my relationship with all the yippies. They got to know me, and I was part of the gang after that. So
it also solidified your relationship, it seems, with the NYPD.
That's very true. And but what I want to say is that a lot of these kids who never in their lives would imagine they would be brutalized by the police and put through central booking have routinely had that done more than once, or at least once, but some of them multiple times. And they came back out, and they're still out there fighting. So that got to tell you something, that they created a hardcore resistance element by doing what they did. And honestly, it was the police brutality that kicked Wall Street into Occupy Wall Street into high gear. I mean, I was down there the first night. If the police had not pepper sprayed those girls blatantly, and that got out all over the media, it was starting to dwindle down there. When that happened, a whole bunch more people showed up down there. And then when they did that mass arrest on the Brooklyn Bridge, it just exploded. So if the police had been smart, they wouldn't have done all the police brutality from the beginning. They would have just kind of left it alone, and it would have died out. Because of what they did, it became an international movement. And I don't know how many, everybody knows what Occupy Wall Street was. So, thank you to the NYPD and their brutality. We became such a big movement, and they really created a hardcore resistance among a lot of young kids.
Well, I think actually Occupy Wall Street picked up a lot of what they did from things that the yippies did in the past. For example, it was very traditional for yippies to occupy parks or other public property to use as a basis to do protests out of, and that's really what Occupy Wall Street did down at Zuccotti Park. A lot of the same issues, banks, freedom of information, freedom of speech, were central to yippie organizing, and yippie organizing was aimed at youth. WS really was in a lot of ways aimed at youth, and brought a lot of young people out into the streets and gave them on-the-job training in how to do organizing and rabble-rousing, and also how to stand up to the police. I mean, the first time I went to a protest against a convention with the yippies, I seen Ben Maisel practically just do a flying somersault over a line of riot cops and go running to try to get into a building, get tackled and hauled off to jail. And Aaron K., the yippie pie man, would be throwing pies at people. And
it's like agitator Olympics.
It was, well, I got to tell you, Ben Maisel, when the Democratic Convention was here a long time ago, we camped out in Central Park, and as a thing to get the press out there, they had the Yippie Olympics. They had like a whole, and it brought like a massive amount of press, and they had all kinds of like pie throwing contests and how to steal books out of stores contests. I mean, just stuff that we had made up that was funny, but it's really, we really actually did a Yippie Olympics. Now, I think what the difference is between Occupy Wall Street and the yippies is the yippies were a lot more fun. For one thing, we always had pot to smoke, and we were smoking pot all the time. Like, down there in Zuccotti Park, you had to go like away from the park, and it wasn't a constant smoking going on most of the time. And I mean, back in the day when we used to do the smoking over in Washington Square Park, we'd have a secret location where we would roll up like 2 pounds of really crappy pot and take it over there and give it out to people in Washington Square Park. Also, there was we were much more sexually liberated. Occupy Wall Street is pretty much like very repressed sexually compared to the yippies. I mean, everybody would be sleeping with everybody else in the yippie thing, and in Occupy Wall Street, it's really when there are relationships, pretty much monogamous. There's none of that going on. just the tactics and everything. I mean, Occupy Wall Street is very serious. We were serious at times and completely like sarcastic and crazy and funny at other times. It was, both of them were really, really monumental things that I've been part of in my life, but Yippies were more fun.
How large is your archive?
I estimate it to be 30,000 images, something like that. I mean, you know, I covered the Tompkins Square Park riots, the squatter eviction. One of my most famous photographs is of the armored personnel carrier, aka the tank that they brought in to evict 5 squatted buildings on East 13th Street.
It was July 4th, wasn't it?
It was before July 4th. They retook the building on July 4th.
I remember taking my nephews and nieces to see the fireworks, and we came by and we saw this like militarized zone
Yeah.
over on 13th Street, and I was like, what the hell is going on here?
Well, that was hilarious. They had evicted that building, you know, at a cost of probably like $500,000 and thousands of police officers. Then the squatters got back in the building, and right as I was watching on TV, and right as Rudy Giuliani was giving his 4th of July patriotic speech, they all cut into the program with a helicopter shot of the squatters up on the building, like shaking their fists. And I go, all right. I grabbed my camera and running over to 13th Street to take pictures
That's
of
what
it.
that's what brought us to 13th Street.
Yes.
Because we knew some people who were shooting the fireworks, so we got a nice primo spot on the drive over the East River, and then all of a sudden I'm looking at this helicopter flying over, and I'm like, that's a little close to be like TV.
Something's going on
Something's
there, right?
happening.
Yeah.
So we went and checked it out, and the cops wouldn't let us down the block or anything. It was,
Well, what's interesting is they instituted a new procedure after that happened, that they wouldn't do an eviction of a squatted building unless they had a demolition crew ready to go. I mean, as soon as the eviction happened, they would come in and demolish the building right afterward, because they didn't want to have to go through, you know, they knew the squatters would go back in if they didn't tear the buildings down, you know. I almost lost my hearing that night because a squatter threw a Super M80 off the top of that building, and it landed right between me and this big cop from the 9th precinct they call Lurch, and it blew up, and I couldn't hear for a week after that, you know. Eventually Lurch went that way, I went the other way, but then the next thing I know, Lurch came back and grabbed me and dragged me down the street and threw me over the police barricade at the end of the street. I mean, I can't tell you how many times that happened, you know. I did a month of solitary in Atlanta Federal Penitentiary, which is one of my connections with Bradley Manning, which I spoke about at Fort Meade. Not a lot of people have done time in solitary confinement in federal custody, so I had a lot of sympathy, and I understood that what Bradley Manning went through was much worse than anything I did, but I know how hard it is, and I had ultimate respect for Manning. And the other, you know, connection I had was, at one point in time I had a top secret clearance when I was in the Navy, stationed in the military dictatorship in Greece. And if there had been a WikiLeaks back then, so, you know, I handled a lot of message traffic, which is part of your job as an air traffic controller. And I saw a lot of stuff coming out that, you know, documented that the U.S. government was fully aware of what the dictatorship was doing to its own people there. And if there had been a WikiLeaks, I might have been tempted to leak all that information out like Bradley Manning did. So, you know, that's some of the...
so you kind of saw yourself in Bradley Manning then?
A lot, you know, more than most people, because like I say, not many people have had a top secret clearance in the military, seen stuff that they thought was war crimes, and also have done time in solitary confinement. That's one thing that, you know, immediately, I was one of the first persons which you actually came to organize a support protest for Bradley Manning here in New York City.
Yeah, I mean, I still maintain that he's a political prisoner.
Yeah. I maintain that he deserves, rather than Obama, the Nobel Peace Prize. And in reality, under international law, a soldier is obligated to not cover up war crimes.
Right.
And Bradley Manning is the only one that didn't cover up war crimes. Everybody else, all the way up to Obama, did cover them up. And so they should all be prosecuted, and Bradley Manning ought to be given like the Medal of Honor for doing what he did. And that's really true. If the things were right and just, that's what would happen. But it isn't going to happen. You know, right now I'm kind of, I always think about them every day, but a number of my friends are doing stretches in prison for political activity. Bradley Manning isn't a friend, but he's one of them. Barrett Brown is now facing almost 100 years for his connection to Anonymous.
Essentially for just putting up a link on our website.
Yeah, putting up a link to information that other people, including the media, had already linked up to.
Right.
So, he's in. My friend Lynn Stewart is in jail because of what she had done. I mean, she represented like armed revolutionaries. She was the advocate of the Black Liberation Army and a great lawyer. She represented Larry Davis along with Stanley Cohen and Bill Kunstler. She's in prison.
Because she was a thorn in the side, essentially.
But yes, exactly right. And because she felt that even though they had told her she was restricted on how she could deal with her client in federal prison, she didn't feel that those were right, that she had to abide by the restrictions, so she did it, Unfortunately, it backfired and they put her in prison. And then back to here, the guy that really kept this building together and was one of the people responsible for me being able to stay in New York was Dana Beale. He started this museum. He was arrested for transporting medical marijuana back to New York City, and he's in prison now. It's just every day I think about it, and it makes me very sad that these people that I know and have been big parts of my life are in jail right now. And I always think, like, how much longer is it going to be before they try to lock me up? Although they did lock me up at the Democratic National Convention in Charlotte for 36 hours.
Is that in dismissed or?
Yeah, I jumped over a line of police bicycles because I was trying to get close enough to the delegates so I could yell at them about the treatment of veterans in this country.
You broke the free speech zone?
We weren't going in the free speech zone anyway. I led a march with about 200 people trying to get to where the delegates are, and they blocked us a long way away from the
whole idea of the free speech zone seems bizarre. So that there's areas that are, so there are zones for free speech, and there are zones that, when you're outside of that zone, you give up your right for free speech?
You can say all you want to, but nobody's going to hear what you have to say, and it's all fenced off like a prison cage, Fortunately for me, my judge that I went to trial down in Charlotte over it. The judge, when the prosecutor was saying, well, we were trying to get this march, which was an illegal march, to go to the free speech zone, the judge started rolling his eyes, and I'm going, yeah, hey, maybe I got something going here. Because every time they'd say free speech zone, the judge would give a look like, yeah, I know what you're talking about. Ain't no, you're not going to even bullshit me on this, So,
it's Orwellian, isn't it?
Yeah, extremely. It's a very smart move. Well, it's actually, and I'll go into quickly the story. In a way, this group here is responsible for the development of that, the free speech zones, by organizing protests at all the conventions. But what happened was they wrote these laws in Charlotte really quickly in order to get ready for the convention. And the law stated that if you cross a police line, you have to have intent to destroy property, attack police, or to commit some kind of a criminal activity. It was pretty clear. In fact, even the cops admitted that I told them the reason I was jumping the police line was that I wanted to go and yell at the delegates. So when the thing, and it was a bench trial with just a judge,
But how is it that the law states that if you're jumping a police line, your intent is to X, Y, and Z?
No. They said you had to have intent. In other words, it turned out that jumping the police line wasn't illegal because my intent was to use my First Amendment rights. If I had jumped the police line and knocked a cop out, then I would have violated the law. You understand? So the judge said, well, since you admit and Mr. Penley says that his only intent was to yell at people, his jumping the police line under this law is not illegal, so I have to find him not guilty. But in the meantime, I spent 36 hours in solitary confinement in Charlotte, and I actually thought I was getting Guantanamo because after I was arrested, I was put in a very small solitary cell, and they took everyone else that was arrested with me out and arraigned them, but they didn't take me out and arraign me And then I was only getting out 3 times a day to eat. When I got out the next day to eat, I asked the guard, like, how come everybody else got a rain but me? And they go, nah, don't worry about it. They're going to get around to you. And I'm sitting in there. I haven't had any conversation with anybody outside of there. And I'm going, man, I'm getting ready to be put in an orange jumpsuit, shipped down to Guantanamo. I was really started freaking out about it, you know. But
Obama is doing assassinations of American citizens, which I think is a real escalation in what presidents can do. He also put an executive order into place called NDAA, which says American citizens can be detained and taken to Guantanamo with no due process of law and no access to the courts. Now, people may think, oh, Obama's not a bad guy. He's not going to overstep the boundary. But a lot of dead kids in Pakistan would, if they weren't alive now, would kind of say, I don't believe that. The drone strikes not only got people that they had targeted, but killed a lot of civilians. That down the road, a future president might start to do drone strikes on American citizens inside the country. You know, where is this going? As time goes by, the 1% that control most of the wealth in this country have controlled more and more. If you look at statistics, over the years, they've concentrated the wealth in their hands a lot more over the years than ever before. And then how are we going to change it? We tried with sitting down on the street at Occupy Wall Street. But I think that at some point, people got to realize that if they want their families to survive, they're going to have to go further with it. And I'm not going to specifically say what I'm thinking about here, but I'll just give you an example now. I've been to veterans hospitals all around the country, and I talked to the vets. The vets have, for the most part, have absolutely no faith in the government. They've all heavily armed themselves and are waiting for the government to come knock down their door to take away their guns, and they're not going to give them up without a fight. And these are people that the U.S. military trained themselves. So a large percentage of veterans in this country have absolutely no faith in the government. They really hate the Fed, the Federal Reserve. It's almost 100%. People will bring up how they think that the Federal Reserve is a big scam to keep the wealth concentrated in the hands of the rich people in this country. America's ripe for revolution, and if they want to keep this police state rolling like they have been, and they want to keep making it harder and harder for working class and poor people just to feed their families and survive, they're going to get what they get anywhere, what they got in France. If anybody's seen them play Les Miserables, they're going to see that here too. What they're getting in France, what they're getting in Greece, what they're getting in like a lot of countries where people see they don't have much option for themselves and their families to survive, are going to get out in the streets and start fighting back. And that's going to happen here. I mean, we always said at Occupy Wall Street, we were like Paul Revere, who was writing to make a warning to the people that the bad people are coming, and you better get ready for them, and you better get your powder dry. And we did that, and people heard the warning, so we did that. And we did that on a nonviolent basis, but at this point in time, if they don't heed our warning, and I'm also talking about the people that are running the police state and the 1% that are controlling most of the wealth in the country, if they don't heed that warning, then things are going to get really bad for everybody. And they better be ready for it. I'll be dead, you know. I mean, I don't really got that much time left here on the planet. But I'm happy that I was part of Occupy Wall Street, and I really intimately know the street level Occupy resistors that are left out of Occupy Wall Street, who are blockading pipelines in Texas, climbing up in trees in Pennsylvania, blockading pipelines, getting arrested in Bank of Americas, helping people with Occupy Relief, Occupy Sandy Relief out where people got hit by the hurricane, doing all kinds of projects now. I'm glad that I know them and they know me, and I think that I helped as part of their education about agitation and organizing.
I bought a police scanner so I could listen. I would work at nights. I would just stay in my room in the apartment and listen for stuff to happen, run out and take pictures of it, go to the corner payphone, call the newspapers and see if they're interested, hop a cab, take the film into the newspaper, and the next day it would be in the paper. And one thing I gotta say is, very few people have had the feeling of one of their photographs being on the cover of a daily paper in New York City, but the next day, everywhere you go in the city, your photos are on the newsstand everywhere, and it was just such a thrill to have that happen.
Great big rush.
It is. I mean, one of my favorite ones was ACT UP was marching from the West Village to the East Village because of some ACT UP members had been gay bashed over at St. Mark's Place. And it was a Friday night, and they were marching over to the East Village, and they encountered Ed Kach coming home from the movies with his police bodyguards. He was former mayor, but they still assigned him police bodyguards.
Right.
And being the stubborn son of a bitch Kach was, he decided not to wait until the march got through and go across. He waited right into the middle of the march. And as soon as people saw who it was, they went nuts on him, and it ended up a guy stuck his finger like right up in Koch's face, and Koch thought he was going to hit him. I did too, but I got a photo of it right as that happened, and the guy had a T-shirt on with two guys kissing. It said "ACT UP" on the shirt. Well, who did I call for that picture? The New York Post. I called the New York Post. It was on the cover of the New York Post, and it was a terribly unflattering image of Koch with the headline "Gay Rage." It was, That really, because I always hated Kach, it just made my day that I was able to do that.
What made him want to wade through this crowd?
It was just Ed Kach was like that, I mean, he didn't...
These people didn't... He had a reputation of not being liked by these people.
He didn't care. I mean, honestly, it was Ed Kach.
That's arrogant.
Plus, he had a big entourage of cops with him, but... Everybody was kind of shocked at the reaction that he got. But me, I'm going, oh my gosh, this is the best thing that's happened to me in a long time. I know I am going to sell these photos. I'm going to make money, and I'm going to get some revenge on Ed Kach. I quit doing photojournalism about 10 years ago, but my photos have been published everywhere, on the cover of every single daily paper in New York Magazine. My photo of Keith Haring was his obituary photograph in Art in America magazine. Wow. I was pretty well published by just about, I did regular assignments for the New York Times, covering the Lower East Side for what was then called the City section, which doesn't exist anymore, but I did that for about 10 years. So you can imagine, I was full-time working as a photojournalist, but under the table, I was working with the squatters and the anarchists and the homeless people camped in Tompkins Square Park, and I was accused of actually starting a riot so I could get pictures of it, but it never happened, I mean, people did say, yeah, John Penley was the first one to throw a bottle, and then he pulled his camera out, but that wasn't true. I know who threw the first bottle because they were standing right next to me, but then I did pull my camera out.
How did you get to be homeless?
I lost my last job, I was working for a radical lawyer, and he got indicted for tax evasion. And he's having to spend so much money on his lawyers that he couldn't afford to keep me working for him anymore. And I have a serious degeneration of my back. I can't do manual labor. In fact, I'm finding myself in the situation with a lot of veterans from the Vietnam era, is that we lose our jobs at 50, 60. We're not going to get another job. It takes years for them to figure out whether they're going to give you any kind of a disability. Right now, the highest suicide rate among veterans is people my age. So I'm in the same boat as them. And honestly, unless I get my disability claim approved, I'm going to just end up dying on the street, possibly. That's the way it is.